Look, I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge any Indigenous people here today. And I often say this now when I deliver a speech. I talk about Australia's story, and there really are only two Australian stories. There's the story of the First Nation, and every other story is a migrant story. And I think it's really important to remember that every single one of our 25 million current Australian stories is of value, and is just as important as anybody else's. Look, I do have some notes, but I think Jason covered a fair bit, so I may go a little bit more casual, and I'll speak for a while. I might even try and cut a little bit of the time so we can go for more questions. But I want to thank Jan and Politics in the Pub for inviting Jason and I to speak. And I want to commend Jason for speaking with such passion, but also for articulating what the issue is. And I'm going to try and, there was one thing you kept referring to, the Student Resource Standard, and I thought let's just give it a figure. The Student Resource Standard that's been agreed to is close to $14,000 for a high school student, and close to, I think it's just under $10,000 for a primary school student. So when you hear us talk about Student Resource Standards, we're talking about this agreed value, or this agreed sense that it costs nearly $14,000 a year to educate a high school kid, and about $10,000 to educate a primary school kid, if we have that at what we accept. Now, 4 years ago, I left I might just put the, is that going to be there, can we?
You can take that out.
I'll use the old teacher's voice if that...
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me up the back?
He's got a loud voice.
We need to record.
Okay.
Oh, it's been recorded.
We want to record this, every word, every syllable.
You go. Will you take out all the ums and ahs?
This is not a recording. This is not a recording.
Oh, don't worry, everything's recorded. 4 years ago, I made a decision to leave a job that I absolutely loved. I was the principal of a public high school, and it's the greatest job that I've had, and I'll say that, and I'll say it straight down the barrel of the camera. The greatest job that you can have is to work in a school. And especially if you can work in a school where you know that you're making a difference. And I made that decision to leave and to go into politics so that maybe those opportunities that we gave our kids, we could try and make policies across the board. It's also a little bit of this idea that you want some people making some decisions around education who've actually done some of the hard yards in schools. And I'll acknowledge the work of the current minister and the previous minister, Adrian Piccoli. This is not in any way a go at them. But what I will say is, you understand very much what the issues are. Now, we talked about some fair school funding. A couple of weeks ago, I had, and I wrote about this in an op-ed, I had a couple of kids as I was locking up my office just come over, call out, "Hey sir, what are you doing?" There was a couple of ex-students came and gave me a hug. Now that's a real story. There are some boys who've given us a hard time, but both of them, we got them through and they did well. What I didn't tell is one of the backstories of one of those children. One of those kids, the only safe place for him was school. The only place where somebody actually gave a damn about him was at school. The only place where he felt valued was at school. And a number of times, potentially, he could have been shown the door. But we took it as a responsibility of us as a school to make sure that he stayed there. Now you can have,
No.
thanks. You can have all the goodwill in the world, and we had enormous amounts of goodwill. But I'll tell you what made it a bit easier. A little bit of extra funding made it a bit easier, because it meant that we could do things like run a breakfast program. So kids who couldn't come to school, or couldn't come to school with food, we gave them something. It meant that we could run different programs so that we could buy kids clothes. You're talking about some kids who are really struggling. You're talking about programs that could give kids a bit of extra assistance. Finding some money so that every child had an opportunity to have an experience. So when you get, and they still do it, I did it when I was a kid, I loved it. My favourite thing was a medieval day. You know, there's this guy who comes in, you know, and I think they've got a girl now as well. And they come in and they bring all the medieval stuff, and you have the history lesson in the hall, and you get to pull the swords out and do all this medieval stuff. That's fantastic. But what happens for a school that can't afford that? What happens when the kids actually genuinely can't afford it? When you've got students in your school whose parents have to make a decision as to whether they go on an excursion or whether they are genuinely paying the bills or buying food. Now there's a lot of pride. And I saw many parents who went without to give their children things. But I think the one story that I'll never get out of my head, and it's a vision. I used to stand at the school gates with the deputy principals. We'd greet the kids. It was the thing that we did. You know, this is a welcoming place. Everybody belongs. The school has to be the one place where everybody belongs. But it also served another purpose. I was very big on uniform. And I understood that certain kids sometimes couldn't have the uniform, so we'd buy some uniforms and have a spare, kids could borrow it. But there was one particular day when a kid came and he was wearing a pair of joggers, and he knew that, like, it's got to be black shoes. I let them have black joggers or black leather joggers because you got it for safety purposes. And I'm not going to use his name, but I basically said, "Why aren't you wearing your shoes today?" And he said, "Sir, my brother's got caught today and he needs to wear the shoes." That's the stuff that you could deal with. So what we did is we then were able to scrounge some money. We wrote to a shoe manufacturing place, and they very kindly donated it. But we shouldn't have to do that. We should have the funding that allows us to do that. If philosophically, education is about making sure that every single child gets the opportunity to have the best learning possible, well, we've got to make it happen. And we've got to understand that there are some schools that might need this much help, there are some schools that need this much, and there are some that need that much. And that's the difference between equality and equity. Because equality means you give everyone the exact same amount. But there are some people and some school communities that need more. So once you understand the philosophy and you set everything around the philosophy of what you believe in and what education systems are, then you work it out. Now, it was about April when I did a Far West tour. I decided to go from Moree. We went from Moree basically all the way out to Broken Hill. And we went the long way, the up and down. I tried to visit as many schools and communities as possible because I wanted to see firsthand the differences. There's enormous challenges there. We can put a lot of money in. Money is really important, but there's also other issues there. The isolation for those children is just phenomenal. Teachers can't stay there that long because there aren't too many other things for them. A whole of government approach needs to go into place so that when a kid graduates from Wilcannia High School, there's a TAFE option for them, there's a work option for them, there's a university option there for them. Because we can do as much as we want in a school and fill every single child's head with dreams and hopes. And then when they get out of there, if there's nothing beyond those school gates, then we as a society have actually failed them. So everybody has got to take some responsibility. And we're seeing more and more people say, well, school's got to do this. The latest I heard is they want to measure kids for their weight. Why the hell are we doing that in schools? Surely this is a public shaming that we don't need. We keep hearing about our so-called educational standards slipping. So what's the response then from some of the federal government? Oh, we've been putting lots of money in and we're not getting there. Educational standards are not just measured on one thing. Educational standards are measured on where a kid gets to a certain point in time. But this is what I want. And I want it for my own child before I want it for anybody else's. I would expect it for my own child. I want my child to finish with school. I want him, of course, to be academic. But I want him to be well-rounded. I want him to understand compassion, kindness, the importance of giving to somebody else, the ability to think critically and to start questioning whether everything is as it's presented. That's actually what I wanted. And that's what we get in a holistic education system. And so when people, and it is a lot of politicians or people who don't know much about education, just simply say, well, why are your standards dropping? And you say, well, hang on a second, what is it you're actually measuring? And how can you tell me if they are dropping? And do you think there's just one simple solution? Do you think that every single child who walks into a classroom has come from the same environment? No. Do you think that everybody starts at the same point? No. Do you think everybody finishes at the same point? No. So in schools, and I say in schools because I know schools do it, but we as governments, and I'll say government and opposition, we can ask a school to make a child believe in anything. Here's the aspiration. We're going to set this aspiration. And the child is here. So there's a gap between where they're at and where the aspiration is, where they want to go, where they can dream. But unless we actually build that ladder to the aspiration, then all we're doing is we're just filling their head with dreams. And that's the big challenge. When we talk about a school resourcing standard of being $14,000, well, every single child then should be at least at that $14,000 benchmark. We've got a situation now where under some of the new the so-called Gonski agreements, New South Wales public schools are actually $800 million less than what they're meant to have getting these 2 years. Now, Jason spoke about the 2 years being the money. These were meant to be the 2 years when the big money came in. And that's not so the schools can fatten their accounts and build nice gardens and things. That's so they can employ people who are going to give students an opportunity. That's how they can open up the schools to the community. And I'll keep using the word opportunity because that's what education is. When you haven't had much, education is the only thing that's going to get you to the point that you need to get to. And unless we invest properly in it, and unless we make a conscious decision that every single child deserves the best education, wherever they may live, whatever their cultural background may be, whatever their economic background may be, then I think we have failed. And that's something that's really important. That's the thing that drives us, and it has to drive us. So when you get somebody who says, just before the election, we're on a unity ticket, and then just a little while later cuts billions of dollars, then I think what we can say is we need to ask more questions. And I'm proud to say that the Labor Party, and I'll get a little bit political, I'm really proud to say that the Labor Party said that they will restate that funding that was cut. That's a commitment that's been made federally. So there's the federal issue and there's a state issue. Now, the states pick up primarily, so 80% of the funding gets picked up for public schools by the state. I'd like to see more come from the feds. The feds are the ones who've got the capacity to raise much greater money. They're the ones with the bigger bucks. Why aren't we putting more into public schools? Why is it that public schools might be then seen as the second option? They shouldn't be. I'm not going to get into the big argument about whether public or private, but what I will say is this. If a student's parents want to send them to a non-government school for whatever reason it may be, faith-based reason or whatever personal reason they may have, that's not my problem. My problem is if they send them to a non-government school because the local government school they deem isn't good enough. So if we can get every single government school to be a great and outstanding school that's fully resourced and is got everything that you want, and then people decide to move their kids to non-government sector, you say, okay, maybe it's for whatever reason, maybe faith-based, family-based, whatever it might be. But what I'm seeing, sadly, are situations where kids are being put in non-government schools because it's deemed that the government school doesn't offer the things that they need. So that's where philosophically I believe in it. I won't get into that argument about the publics and privates, other than to say, fund them fairly. You think it doesn't grate me when I drive along the Pacific Highway and I see massive gates and beautiful gardens and things like that, and I go and visit one of the local public schools, and I do so many schools, and you're seeing the poor general assistant trying to, get around on their ride-on lawnmower on that bare patch of grass. There's one general assistant. You can't tell me that school doesn't need more assistance. And Jason's absolutely correct. When you're a kid and you walk into a school, and that school has got leaking taps, things that are broken, it looks old, it looks tired, what does that tell you? It tells you that you are not valued. Yeah. And the reality of it is this. When I started at Punchbowl Boys High School, we had bars on the windows. And we had barbed wire on the fence. We had, when you walk down the steps, the first little bit, I just always remember the gate. It was one of those old style gates, and there was a little trick to it. Because I'd leave, I'd be the last one to leave. You'd have to walk, and I might just do the drama bit here. You'd walk. So you've got to kind of just hitch the gate a little bit, and then you've got to lift it. And then there was like this little metal thing that we just had hanging around that you had to kind of tuck in so that it wouldn't blow away. When a kid walks in there, when a parent comes to enroll their child in that school, I might be the best principal in the world, I may have the most outstanding teachers in the world, we may get the best results in the world, they don't miss that. They don't miss that. They see bars on windows and they say, this is a problem. They see barbed wire on a fence, this is a problem. Perception is really important, but it gives kids esteem. As soon as we got rid of that, as soon as we started painting the school, as soon as we started putting carpet around the place, do you know what happened? The kids took pride in their school. And the kids started to actually behave in a different way, which meant that in the classroom, they started to get to that really important thing, which is actually the learning. But you don't have that simple silver bullet that just says, oh, we're going to introduce, these literacy programs and it's going to fix it. Education is not like that. Education is holistic. Every single thing has got an interconnection. The morale of the staff, the staff feeling like they're actually getting genuine support. Now, Jason referred to the department, really good example. I'd be able to ring up somebody in the department, my local office, so they're broken up into offices. So basically, we had about 30 schools, I'll call it a cluster, 30 schools in our cluster. And that was like a district. So I would ring district office because I had a kid who might have come to my school who needed some, we needed to provide some extra assistance to, and we just didn't have anyone who's an expert in that. Hi, I've got so-and-so just involved. Have you got somebody who can come and work with one of my teachers, or have you got some resources that we can use? Yeah, that'd be good. And they would do that. And that's the department. What we have right now is a situation where the curriculum experts, and we've had a whole heap of new syllabus documents come through, but the curriculum experts don't exist in those offices anymore. There is now 1 or 2 curriculum experts per subject, and they sit in Sydney. So if you're in Burke and you need an educational expert in mathematics to help you in your school, the best you're going to do is a phone call with somebody in Sydney. So when Jason talks about the department, that's the support, because what it does is it supports schools which ultimately support our students, and then it provides the learning outcomes that they need. We don't get it just simply by saying, oh, we're going to cut this job, and then you know what, you can do it on the internet. I'm not an internet person. I actually want to work with somebody. I want to see somebody who can work with me in the classroom and to help me. You can put up all the PowerPoint presentations that you want, but you will never take away that human interaction of teaching. And I think more and more we're seeing there's a taking away of the human interaction, and that's something that really bothers me, because teaching and quality teaching is predicated on relationships. We've got something in common. We've all been in schools before. Every single one of you would know you're great teachers, and every single one of you would know the teacher who didn't even give you a run. Now, that great teacher was somebody who ultimately built some sort of a relationship with you, and you worked harder for that teacher. You gave your very best. So it's all interlinked. Now, I'm just going to wrap it up with, because I'm looking forward to any questions, so feel free to ask any questions when we get to the Q&A bit. But I just want to wrap it up with this. We are coming into an election. There's going to be a lot of talk about infrastructure. We got panned because we said, hey, we're going to put some air conditioners in schools. Oh, that's ridiculous. Why is that ridiculous? Why should a child sit in a classroom where it's over 40 degrees for 6 hours and you're going to expect them to learn? How do you think a teacher can teach? It comes down to that idea. People thought there was a luxury item. It's not a luxury item. What you're doing is you're creating the conditions for quality learning. And if you create the conditions for quality learning, then you're going to be able to achieve those outcomes. And that's what I always think of. When you've been in a classroom, you kind of understand it. Because you try and teach. Everyone always refers to Year 9. Poor Year 9 English, they always call it a bad rap. Everyone refers to the Year 9 English class on an afternoon as the archetypal class that's just going to drive you, to lose your hair. But the reality of it is, as a teacher, it's really difficult. As a kid, it's near impossible. So if you create conditions, then that actually makes a difference. How do you think it feels when you go past schools and you see, like in some schools, up to 20 demountables on the playground? Come on. We are a state that is swimming in money. We're quite willing to spend $1.2 billion on a metro. Willing to spend $2 billion on some stadiums. If we're genuine about schools, let's start investing that money in schools. I said, I've got plenty of notes, but I'm more than happy to take sort of any questions. I just wanted to give you a general thing. So thanks again, and feel free to ask anything later.